Am I back far enough?
Yeah, you're good. Hey there, everybody. Sorry for keeping you hanging there. Um, we were having some difficulties with. Sorry for keeping you hanging there. Um, we were having some difficulties. And I'm turning off my phone so that you don't hear that in the back. The joy of technology. We've all been there, right? Okay. Tim, can you say something so that we can hopefully make sure that we're not echoing in your ears this morning?
Yeah, good morning. Glad that you were able to join us today as we talk about current reality and how we might want to look at things at this time of crisis and anxiety.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'm taking that as a good sign that we are not echoing and that you can hear us this morning. It's good to see all of you this morning. Tricia and Matt and Marie and Sandy and Marilyn and Susan. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So we thought that we just have a little bit of fun to start off this morning because, you know, there's not enough things in this world that are fun. And then we'll get to the serious conversation about current reality. So here's our question. In the comments, tell us, what is it that you are enjoying right now doing outside? Are you going for a walk? Are you running? Are you biking? Are you gardening? And if anybody has any tips, this might be a selfish question, on container gardening, you need to point them my direction, okay? No, in all seriousness, what are you enjoying doing outside right now? I know Tim has an answer to that question.
Yeah, I've been walking every day for at least an hour, hour and a half.
That's a long walk. How many miles does that take you?
It's about 4 miles or a little over.
I'm seeing some other folks that are also saying walking the dog, walking with my wife, walking and watching my children weed the flower beds and rake the leaves, prayer walking, take a walk every day with our crew and the 4 little ones. Brian's running. Sarah's walking with the family. Lots of walking. Nobody's gardening yet, huh? I was hoping that there would be somebody gardening. So in my family, about day 2 of the whole quarantine, my parents were going out for a walk, and they have deemed any walk that they take a tape measure walk in reference to keeping 6 feet distance from everybody else. There's a whole other story about that I'll tell you at some point in time. My father's what we call Kennyisms. Matt's been writing, and he's been working on it in the backyard. And I'll leave the rest of what you said there, Matt, off of the comments. Marie also said that they planted seeds and will plant them on your patio. Yeah, that's what I need to get around to. So, thanks for sharing with us what you are enjoying doing outside. So let's jump in, Tim, to what we wanted to talk about today, around the Stockdale Paradox. And before Tim does that, what I want to let those of you that are listening know is that we're going to download this and we'll put it on the blog post. So we're going to have a series of questions that we hope will help you to think about current reality and also the future that we're all looking forward to as well. Don't feel like you have to write all this down. We'll put it on the blog and it'll be there for you. So, Tim, you want to tell us what the Stockdale Paradox is and why we thought that maybe having a conversation about it would be helpful today?
Well, sure, Sarah. I'll start with how it got its name. It's named after Admiral James Stockdale, who was a POW in Vietnam. he was in solitary confinement for over 7 years. Part of the reason that this is important, and it was Jim Collins in his book Good to Great that really called it the Stockdale Paradox. But it was one of the things that Stockdale said: you must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And that really kind of fits the situation that we're in today across the whole world, but especially in the United States and in our churches.
Yeah. So let us know in the comments, how many of you have heard of the Stockdale Paradox when you read Good to Great many years ago? I know, Tim, you mentioned it on one of the blog posts recently, so you might have seen it in reference there. I know as I have been working with Brene Brown around the Dare to Lead stuff, she also talks about it there. Is this the first time you're hearing about this, or is it a familiar concept to you? Steve gave us a thumbs up. He's heard of it before. How about others? Have you heard of it before? And there's a slight delay here, folks. You probably already know that. So it's familiar. All right.
So Sarah, as people are answering, one of the other things that Stockdale said, I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining moment of my life, which in retrospect, I would not trade.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got a mix of folks. Some are saying it's familiar. Some are saying it's the first time. Some are saying heard of it and think it's a strong concept. Others are saying I looked it up after Tim referenced it. So we've got some folks have used it in their work. So what we want to do for the rest of our time together is walk through what I'll call 5 big buckets of things that, as we've been thinking about our current reality, some of these things you've already been thinking about, but some of them you probably haven't been thinking about. And so we've put them in some big buckets and are going to walk through those, not in a ton of detail because we don't want to keep you here forever. We'll put that on the blog post, but to give you some idea of some things that might be helpful in terms of naming that current reality, and then always coming back to the question of what does this current reality, this new reality, make possible? So that we can also hold that intention with the hope for the future. So, Tim, you want to get us started with the first one?
Yes, we were talking about really a foundational piece. What's the purpose of the church? And do you have, well, I guess we just have to redefine again what the purpose of the church is and what we're about, how that purpose gets lived out in a new reality.
Yeah, so you've heard, if you've been with Tim and I any length of time, you know that we talk about the mission as making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And so in this new current reality that we're living in, how is worship taking place? How are you discipling people? How are you serving in the local community? Pastoral care looks vastly different than it did a month ago. How's administration happening? So thinking about the foundation, the purpose of the church, even with this new reality, if on the other side, the church is not only going to come through it, but thrive on the other side, we have to be doing those things. We have to be engaging in the foundational aspects of the church. And so as you think about the big bucket areas, some of those areas you might not be doing as much of, or it might have shifted something. What's the current reality in those big buckets?
Well, and Sarah, we already know that we're doing worship differently. And what I want to say is I've been excited, impressed proud of the way people have found a way to continue to worship, even though we don't gather
Right.
in the same space.
Right. And I think that's a great example, Tim, of both the current reality and the future hope, because part of what I have seen is so many people that are now you found a way, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on YouTube, whether you're recording something, whether you're sitting and sharing your sermon, whatever it is that you've done. Who would have thought 6 weeks ago if somebody said you can't worship in person? We would be finding ways to still be the community. And so, part of what it's made possible is your creativity. Part of what it's made possible is your ability to use technology. You all have learned, I am certain we're learning things about technology that most of us probably didn't care about 6 weeks ago. And that's an example of what's making possible. So you see and you feel the tension in the midst of that. Of course we want to be together in worship. Of course we want to be in our local churches. But the brutal reality is we can't right now. And so what it's made possible is connections with a whole new group of people. And we're going to get to that, I hope, in our time together of you're reaching people that you wouldn't have reached before. And so how are you leveraging that and welcoming those new people into your community? And have you even stopped to think about it? Maybe not. Okay, ready to move on to the second big bucket?
Well, I am, but let me add one other thing, and it's something that you've talked about in a different context. It's okay to be curious at this time. It's okay to ask questions. What do we need to do now? If you've never done it before, it's okay to ask questions about how you might need to do it differently. That would be a positive thing.
Yeah, and and this isn't original to me. I'm borrowing this from somebody else. What they said was, what do you need to pause? What do you need to pivot? What do you need to plan for? And what do you need to purge? I think those were the four things. And those are, to me, it was a great framework to think about, you know what? Some things we just need to hit the pause button on right now. And that's okay. And so get curious about that, as you were saying, Tim. Okay. Second one, so think of the first one as the foundation of everything that's going to follow for what we're talking about.
Yeah, this one might be a little more practical. What are some of the services and supplies that you have to think about in this new reality? What are you relying on now that you've not necessarily had to rely on in the past? And what have been some of the things that have taken place because you were meeting in a building, and because you're not meeting there any longer, what needs to stop? Would that be some things that we're talking about?
Yeah, so this is a silly one, but one of the things that I heard somebody say is, if you're not in the building, call the people who pick up your garbage and dump your garbage every week in your dumpster. You probably don't need them coming every week because nobody's there. You're not producing the garbage. Now, maybe you have a food ministry, and so you are, and so that's not possible. But think about the services that, maybe another way to say it is the subscriptions that you have, the things that are on automatic. Do some of those need to be paused? And you don't need them any longer. My guess is a lot of you have jumped on Zoom for the first time in the past month, and that wasn't something that we were doing. I have with my coaching, but I know for many that's something new. Do you need to think differently about mail services or cleaning services? Any of the things that are happening and think about it both from a financial perspective and actually what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. If you're mailing more things out, do you need that paper to be delivered at a more frequent basis or not, because you're not printing as many bulletins? Do you need to pause and adjust some of those? Supplies for the nursery. There aren't kids in the in the nursery. So you probably don't need some of those supplies, and if they're automatically happening, to look at those in terms of what is happening.
So, Sarah, one of the things I was thinking when we were going over this outline is that it's been over 25 years ago. There was a massive flood in West Virginia where I was a pastor. And one woman's house was totally destroyed, wiped off its foundation, no longer there, not even a sign of it except for the front sidewalk. And one of the most painful pictures I remember out of that flood was that she was on the sidewalk with her broom. Now that seems kind of crazy, kind of foolish, but that's all she knew. It was no longer needed.
Right.
It was no longer a part of her life, but that's all that she knew. And what we're talking about here is you don't have to stand on the sidewalk with your broom right now. There's something else that you need to be thinking about. Your current reality is different.
Right. And so on that topic, Matt made the comment that his congregation has been making a concerted effort to thank our service providers and small businesses with a phone call and shout across the sidewalk. The sidewalk is being used in a different way. So, yeah, it might be that instead of the people that are serving you, you're now reaching out to them. Thanks for that example, Matt. It's a great example of making that shift and seeing the current reality of what's happening. So, and what does it make possible? You know, I think for many of us in seasons like this, what am I saying? Seasons like this. Who of us have been in a season like this before? In a time of crisis, it's a time that we can stop and begin to see both the services that we're receiving in a different way. I've thanked more people in the grocery store than I ever have, for example. Like how often I have taken for granted the people that put things on the shelves. No longer. Whole new reality. And so what are the things that you need to think about? Let's move on to the third bucket in terms of leadership and processes.
Well, if you're working from home and you've got, and there are people that at the church who have worked with you, they're working at home. So you're asking yourself, how does this work differently? How are you making connection with whether it's staff or leadership of the church and the decisions that are being made? What's different about that, and how are you working through those differences?
Yeah, and another one, and I think this one is especially important in terms of what we're experiencing because none of us know. At any given time, one of us could get sick. And so who are you cross-training? And how are you cross-training people to make sure that there's at least one backup for everything that is necessary in terms of the church? If you're a pastor and you should get sick, who is going to step in for that time period that you're sick? I don't even want to think about that, but it's a brutal fact that we need to stop and think about. Does somebody else know how to do the things that need to happen? And for most of us, the answer is probably no. And so that might be something that you need to hit the pause button and take some time to have some conversations. It might get done in a different way, and that's okay. But how can things continue to move forward if someone should get sick? If there's only one person who can deposit checks and they get sick, who else can do that? So make sure that you've got the backups. And then the other one on that, and Tim, help me with the date here. I think on April 14th, there's going to be a a live broadcast around the CARE Act and how churches can be a part of that in terms of applying for financial resources to make sure that you have the funds to keep going and to pay people and to take advantage of what's being offered there.
Right.
And there was an email sent yesterday.
Yes. So, and I think you're right. The 14th, there'll be a live broadcast with Bill Brownson and some others from the conference office. In relationship to that, though, Sarah, I think being proactive may be talking with people who are paid at the church and with some markers. And that is, we can go so long with what we have. And if we get to a place where we don't have that any longer, then we can only go this long before we have to say we have to make some changes. And to do that in advance instead of waiting right up to the last end and say, well, we've run out of money and we can't pay you any longer.
Right.
There's another way to take care of this if we're being proactive.
Yeah, and it might be for our congregations that you've not had the conversation about here's what it takes every week for us to keep going. And even though people aren't in the building, there are still bills that need to be paid. There are still salaries that are being paid. And so being as transparent with your leadership and with the congregation as you can at the very same time, and this is one of those paradoxes as well, at the very same time recognizing that there are people in our communities who are now out of work. And so when they hear of a greater need, they're also saying, yeah, and I have a need too. And so thinking very carefully about how you're communicating clearly what the need is and doing it with compassion. And Tim, I really appreciate what you said, that it's not a reactionary thing that happens, but that there's a plan. When we get to X dollars in the bank, here's what we will need to do, that you've thought about that.
And you put that in a larger context for the whole congregation. I was just mentioning with staff or paid employees, but I think you have to be realistic with the whole congregation. Now, it's not being fatalistic. What you're doing is you're being realistic, which means that once you get to the other side of this, it might change. We already know it's going to be different, but you can make those plans or think about how it's going to be as you move through this crisis.
Yeah. Sara made a wonderful comment about, in regards to ministry and worship services, that if there is an illness, we can grow in our connectional relationship. Absolutely, Sara. That as you're pastoring those two small churches and share with other large churches, encouraging folks and a way to collaborate. Absolutely. This is absolutely a time that we need to be reaching out to one another and learning from one another and seeing the places that we can lean into what one another have to offer, and Susan pointed out that our smaller churches, it's a different thing, and recognizing of how we can collaborate, and those relationships in our small congregations are so very important. And they're all happening in different ways right now. Let's move on to big bucket number 4. And this one is about the congregation and the community, really in terms of communication. And on this one, have you stopped to think about the question, what is their perception of the church right now? Are people seeing it as essential? Are they looking at it as optional? Is it completely off the radar, or is it really important? How are people looking at the church right now? I think part of what I have seen is there are more people leaning into faith and more people looking for the hope that we find in Jesus. And so I find that a very hopeful thing. But if the church is doing something that isn't doing something that the community sees a need for, that could be very different.
Sarah, over our time of podcasts and blogs, we continue to talk about connection with the community. It sounds like I'm trying to take advantage of something here, but this is a wonderful opportunity for the church to change how people perceive the church in the community. We have this opportunity of being able to respond in a way that people would not necessarily expect, or that they've not been looking for in the past, but because we do step up and lead in some ways we haven't been, or haven't been perceived as doing, we can change the perception right now.
Yeah. And so what the basic question is, what are the needs in your community? What needs to happen?
We've been asking that question all along.
Right. And how can you, and again, this might be another place of partnership. What is your part in stepping up to those needs? And I know for many churches that are used to having a food ministry, they're now collecting food by drop off at a car. It's all happening in different ways. And so, saying, well, we need to, but we can't, don't stop there. Push yourself a little bit farther and get creative of what can happen in terms of the resources that you have. I mean, I know more quilting groups that are sewing masks right now. Who would have thought that was what would be happening? And many of them are sewing masks for residents in nursing homes, simply so that they have the protection. What a beautiful expression of the church, and helping folks to find the places where what they have to offer and what is needed can come together. And that's a wonderful place for the church to come together. Marie said, I think that people are seeing the church as essential. They're looking for hope. We've connected with our community in whole new ways. We're doing hope bags, giving bags of food and household items for people. People contact us directly. Yeah, what a beautiful expression of connecting with your local community. And people, when those sorts of ministries are happening, those are the conversations that people start talking about the church. Yeah, where did you get that? Well, we got that food bag from Summit Station. Just contact them and they'll arrange for you to receive what you need. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful example. Tim, anything else that you want to say about that one?
Yes. I learned yesterday of an individual in my neighborhood who has said, you don't have to go to bed hungry. I'll provide food for you if you'll just let me know. Because what I have, I should be able to share with you. If an individual can say that, why can't our churches say that?
Right.
And a connection with the community in such a way that no one right now should have to be hungry or even lonely, right. Isolated. We have the opportunity of making those connections.
Yep. I'm not remembering if it was here in Ohio or if it was a friend up in Michigan. Saw a post yesterday of a school teacher. I'm probably going to get weepy, so forgive me. Okay, never mind. Can't do it. I'll just say a school teacher went to a kid's house and was teaching through the middle schooler is inside the house behind the glass pane door, and the teacher is sitting out on the sidewalk with a whiteboard because they were having trouble with a math problem. In my perception, they were having church. He was sharing what he had. That's what we do in these times. Sorry.
So one of the things, Sarah, that you and I've talked about at times is, well, we don't want to send out another email because we'll just be flooding their their mailbox, and it'll become they won't pay any attention. I think you and I would agree at a time like this, you can't send too many emails.
Yeah.
You've got to over communicate, whether it's emails, texts, phone calls, whatever.
Snail mail. Yeah,
Yes.
We cannot communicate too much right now, and some of that is because things are happening so quickly that we need to keep things up to date. But the other reality is people are taking in a lot of information, and so even simple things we need to say more than once so that people can hear it. It's so lots of opportunities there. To connect with the community and to be able to communicate the love that we know in Jesus. And that's what we can do. Regardless of our circumstances, we can always do that.
So with our time, Sarah, do we need to move on to number 5?
Yes, let's do that.
Well, in the context in which we're in now, the current reality is there are some things that are happening that are outside of our control. And we have to be able to identify those, and how do we respond, not react, but how do we respond and become proactive, even with the things we cannot control.
Right. Things like you've been told to stay at home. You can't worship. The stock market is going down. The stock market is going up. Interest rates are going down. Gas prices are going down. How is all of that going to? What are people thinking because of that? And as a result, how is that going to impact what you're doing in the church? How people will give? How they'll interact with who you are and what their needs are. And so a lot of that is out of our control. And so it's not that we try and take it into control, but we just recognize here's what's happening. And that might require you to shift how you will respond.
And this is not to put more on anyone, but this is an excellent time to learn the facts about certain things, maybe the virus, or what the governor is saying, or what the director of public health is saying, to learn the facts, so that when somebody, and I'll say it this way, comes off the rails, you can still be a very positive presence in their lives and helping them understand the reality of the situation. It doesn't mean you have to correct them. It's starting where they are and helping them move to the truth of the situation.
Right. And that's where this beautiful format that we're on right now in terms of social media can be both a blessing and a curse. And so using it for the good that it can be. And if I've reminded myself of this one time, I've reminded myself a million times that when I see people getting frustrated, what I often find myself saying to them is, remember, people are doing the best that they can right now, and assume a good intention. And when we approach people, even if they're being hateful or hurtful, if we approach people with that kind, loving spirit that we want to be received with, that we have received from Jesus, then the whole conversation can unfold in a different way. So, assuming the best intentions. So that. Go ahead,
Sarah. So there is one other thing. I'm sorry, and that is, I'm not sorry that there's one other thing. I'm just sorry I'm interrupting you, and that is, a little over a week ago, we were being told not to wear masks,
right?
Because it didn't help us. That if you were asymptomatic, or if you were sick, wearing the mask would protect other people, but not you. And now one of the things we're hearing is maybe we all need to be wearing masks. And it may be for the same reason, but it's because we don't know who has been infected and who hasn't, and who's showing symptoms and who hasn't. So what I'm saying is, because one day one thing's one way, and we're in such a flux that that it may be the next day it's different, and so we don't need to be upset with people if they say it one way or the other. We just need to know the facts and be able to step into it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I wanna leave us on a positive note here of all of these things that we've talked about are changing, and we're all living in the midst of. What does this new reality make possible? What are you seeing in terms of what this makes possible? Yeah, yesterday I was texting with back and forth with my mom, and I forget how I got on it, but I ended up saying to her, I'm trying to see here on my text messages. The scroll back might be a little bit too far, if I can find it. But it was something like, families are having dinner together. People are exercising. The ozone layer is being healed. There's less pollution in the air. Streams are coming together. Now you might say, Sarah, that has absolutely nothing to do with the church, but it all has to do with our relationships with one another. And if you would have asked me 6 weeks ago if I thought that technology was going to help us build stronger relationships, or this current circumstance would help us be better neighbors, I probably would have laughed. But that's exactly what I'm seeing happening. That we're connecting with one another in whole different ways. And we're caring for one another in whole different ways. We're making sure that our seniors and our most vulnerable have food, and going to the grocery store for them. And you all shared a whole lot of beautiful examples last week when we did a live about how we'll be in the church and celebrate those things and lift those things up so that people remember, you know what? Church is still happening. God is still present. Jesus is still on the throne. And next week, we're going to get to celebrate Easter in a whole new way and step into a whole new season. So what is this making possible for you, for your church?
So may I bring us back to the Stockdale Paradox?
Sure.
He was asked about people who survived in the midst of those 7 years of his being a POW. And he said the people who did not survive were the people who were optimistic without being realistic.
Are you saying we shouldn't end on hope?
I'm saying that hope is rooted in reality.
Exactly.
And not in just a wishful thinking.
Right.
And the wishful thinking puts the head in the sand. And what we need to do is to stand tall, step up, face what we have in front of us. It may be one step at a time, not knowing what the next step's going to do, but knowing that because of who we are as followers of the living God in Jesus Christ, we'll make it through.
Amen. I think Tim might have just taken us to church. So I'm going to invite you, Tim, to close us in prayer here in just a moment. Let me remind you that we do currently have a daily devotional that's going out. And if you haven't signed up for that, you can do that. And you are welcome to share that with others and join the 350 plus folks that are making that happen. And I know some of you that are here with us today have been a part of writing those devotions. And so I thank you for that as well. We're going to continue to do these lives on a weekly basis. Next week, since it's Good Friday, we're going to shift to Wednesday. So look for that coming announcement coming your way as well. And as Tim said, if something changes and it's not Wednesday, we'll let you know. But we're going to continue to do this and continue to be present here with you. So if there are things that you would like to have conversations about, you reach out and let us know how we can be in conversation with you about that. So Tim, will you close us out and send us out in prayer?
I will. Oh God, again for the day, we're grateful, and we're most grateful that in whatever situation, circumstance we find ourselves right now, that you're with us, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from your love in Jesus. Just as you surround us with that love, give us a deep and abiding peace, so that we know that every step we take takes us more into the places that you want us to be, so that all we say and do brings you glory and works for the good of the people that you've entrusted to us to love and serve. We offer ourselves for that purpose. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Go in peace, friends. Thanks for being with us today. I hope that you enjoy the sunshine at some point in time today and get outside and enjoy being with those that you are living with. We're glad to be here with you today. Go in peace. Bye.